The man who commanded a global restaurant empire, Julian Croft, slipped into a corner booth of his own struggling diner, a ghost in his own machine. He was just another face in the lunch rush until a waitress with haunted eyes and trembling hands approached. As she set down his coffee, she secretly slid a folded note under the saucer. The words on that small piece of paper would detonate a $1 million conspiracy, expose a ruthless criminal network, and leave the city's most formidable billionaire utterly transformed. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian Croft's Manhattan penthouse, a gilded cage that screamed success but whispered a profound, aching loneliness. At 42, Julian had a life most would kill for, a net worth that could erase national debts, acclaimed restaurants across 3 continents, and a name that made competitors flinch. Yet as he sat at his vast mahogany desk, the charcoal of his Tom Ford suit a second skin, the sterile silence of his home was a physical weight on his chest. "Blackwood Diner, Chicago, Unit 47, he murmured, his steel-gray eyes scanning the abysmal report. Revenue down 18%, customer complaints up 32%, employee turnover at a staggering 67%. This diner wasn't just another asset, it was a sanctuary he'd built to honor his grandmother, Eleanor. Now it was hemorrhaging money and worse, its soul. Each complaint was a personal blow. Rude staff, cold food, dirty tables felt unwelcome. His grandmother had taught him that hospitality was a sacred pact. She'd worked double shifts in a greasy spoon in Queens to send him through college, her hands perpetually smelling of coffee, her heart an open door to strangers. "Julie," her voice echoed in his memory, warm and unwavering. "A restaurant isn't about food, it's about making people feel they belong." He had built his empire on that single principle. Now, it was a ruin. When was the last time he'd even been inside one of his own places? Not as a CEO on a sterile, pre-announced inspection, but as a person. His phone buzzed, a reminder for a charity gala. Another night of hollow smiles and conversations with people who only saw his balance sheet. He caught his reflection in the window and saw a stranger, a man entombed in an expensive suit. The passionate boy who dreamed of creating havens of warmth was gone. The Chicago diner was bleeding, and Julian Croft was determined to find out why, even if it meant trading his gilded cage for the real world. 600 miles away on Chicago's south side, Ilara Vance was fighting her own war. Her tiny apartment was a world away from Julian's penthouse, but it overflowed with something his lacked: love, laughter, and the unyielding spirit of a woman who refused to be broken. "Mama, I can't find the sun crayon," 6-year-old Mia called out, her dark curls bouncing as she rummaged through her art supplies. She wore a bright yellow dress Ilara had rescued from a thrift store, her eyes sparkling with a fierce intelligence that mirrored her mother's. "Check under your math homework, Starlight," Ilara replied, her voice a melody of warmth. At 28, exhaustion couldn't dim her natural beauty: caramel skin, expressive dark eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that could disarm armies. Today, she wore her server's uniform, black slacks and a red blouse, armor for the shift ahead at Blackwood Diner. "Found it!" Mia shrieked, holding the crayon aloft like a trophy. "Now I can finish the picture of our dream house!" Ilara's heart clenched. Their current apartment was clean but cramped, the thin walls a conduit for their neighbors' arguments. But it was theirs, a fortress she'd defended with 3 jobs ever since Mia's father vanished. "Tell me about the house," Ilara said, her fingers gently tracing the patterns in her daughter's hair. Mia's face lit up. "It has a giant kitchen for your recipes, a big yard for a puppy, and my own room with purple walls and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling." "That sounds like heaven, baby." If only Mia knew how fragile their world was. The job at Blackwood Diner barely kept them afloat, and a rent increase loomed. On the counter sat an envelope with her saved tips, $347. Not nearly enough for Mia's school trip, let alone a better life, but it was a start, and Ilara's life was built on small victories. Her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Happy to watch Mia after school today. That child is a blessing. As they walked to the bus stop, Mia's small hand in hers, Ilara couldn't shake the unease that coiled in her gut. Something was deeply wrong at the diner. Money vanished from the tip pool, and the district manager, Marcus Thorne, watched everyone with the cold, predatory eyes of a shark. Yesterday, she'd questioned her short paycheck, and Thorne had cornered her in the supply closet. His breath smelled of stale cigarettes as he'd whispered, "Be careful, Ilara. A pretty single mother like you can't afford to make trouble." The threat was clear, chilling her to the bone. She needed this job. Mia needed stability. But as the bus rumbled toward another uncertain day, Ilara made a silent vow. Somehow, she would protect her daughter. She would find a way to expose the truth. She just had to be smart. The autumn wind bit at Julian as he stepped out of a rented sedan. He'd swapped his $1,000 suit for worn jeans and a faded university sweatshirt, camouflage for the working-class neighborhood. The irony was thick, a billionaire playing dress-up to understand his own failure. From the outside, the diner looked perfect, a slice of retro Americana he'd designed himself. He pushed open the door. The 1950s aesthetic was there, checkered floors, red vinyl booths, but the atmosphere was toxic. It felt tense, hostile. A hostess muttered, "Sit where you want," without looking up from her phone. Julian chose a booth with a clear view of the dining room. What he saw made his stomach churn. Servers moved with a leaden reluctance, their smiles dropping the second they turned from a table. Behind the counter, staff huddled in hushed, anxious conversations. "Coffee?" The voice was melodic, professional. Julian looked up into the most striking face he'd seen in years. It was Ilara. Her name tag was pinned neatly to her immaculate uniform. She carried herself with a dignity that seemed out of place in the diner's oppressive gloom. Her eyes held a deep weariness, but also a spark of fierce intelligence. "Please," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "Black." A flicker of recognition crossed her eyes, so fast he almost missed it. She simply nodded and moved away with a grace that captivated him. He watched her work the room. Unlike her colleagues, Ilara was a beacon of warmth. She remembered an elderly man's order, helped a mother with a spilled drink, and met a rude customer's impatience with an unwavering, genuine smile. When she returned with his coffee, Julian launched his cover story. "Haven't been here before. Food any good?" "The apple pie is a revelation," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. Then it happened. As she placed the mug down, her hand moved with liquid speed, sliding a folded piece of paper under the saucer. The move was so fluid, so subtle, it was invisible. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second, and in that glance Julian saw it all. Fear, determination, and a desperation that struck him like a physical blow. "I know who you are," she whispered, her voice a ghost beneath the diner's noise. "They're gutting this place from the inside, and they'll destroy you too." His hand froze, his heart hammered against his ribs. She knew. Her professional mask slid back into place. "Can I get you anything else?" "The pie," Julian managed, his throat suddenly dry. "You mentioned the pie." As she walked away, his mind raced. How? His photo was rarely in the press. He looked nothing like the polished CEO. With trembling fingers, he retrieved the note. The handwriting was urgent, precise. "They are stealing from you. Meet me tonight. Millennium Park, Crown Fountain, 8 p.m. Come alone. Don't trust anyone here." Beneath the words was one name, Thorne. Julian folded the paper, his mind already calculating, analyzing. But beneath the cold logic, a profound respect bloomed for the woman who had just risked everything to warn a stranger. He watched the man he now knew was Marcus Thorne, impeccably dressed, with an aura of slick intimidation, stalk through the dining room. Thorne's gaze swept past Julian, lingering for a moment too long. Julian left the diner, but not before catching Ilara's eye one last time. He saw her fear, but beneath it, he saw a glimmer of hope. In 30 minutes, a stranger had shattered his world, and in doing so, had given him a purpose he hadn't felt in years. He would be at that fountain. He had to know more. At 8 p.m., Julian stood by the Crown Fountain, the city lights painting the evening sky. He'd wrestled with his doubts all afternoon. Was this a setup? A disgruntled employee's revenge fantasy? But he couldn't shake the memory of the genuine terror in Ilara's eyes. He saw her approach, wrapped in an oversized sweater that made her look vulnerable, yet her stride was purposeful. Her eyes scanned the crowd before locking onto his. "You came," she said, her voice quiet. "You gave me a reason too," he replied. They walked along a quieter path, the silence stretching between them. "I need you to know I'm terrified," she finally said, her voice steady despite the admission. "If Thorn finds out I'm talking to you, I don't know what he'll do, but I can't watch this happen anymore." She stopped and faced him, the park lights illuminating the exhaustion and tension etched on her face. "They're stealing you blind, Mr. Croft. This isn't just skimming the tills. It's a systematic operation, hundreds of thousands of dollars." "How did you know who I was?" A small, sad smile touched her lips. "You were on the cover of Chicago Business Weekly a few months ago. I read it at my daughter's pediatrician's office. Knowledge is the only thing they can't take from you." Her words hit him harder than any boardroom insult. Here was a waitress, a single mother, educating herself in stolen moments, while he, the CEO, had become a stranger to his own company. "Tell me everything," he urged. She did. She detailed a 2-year campaign of theft, starting small and escalating to fake vendor invoices and kickbacks. She spoke of Thorn's threats, not just against her job, but against her daughter, Mia. He knew where they lived, where Mia went to school. He made it clear, she said, her voice hardening, that silence was the only way to keep her safe. "Why tell me now? What changed?" "Because staying silent wasn't protecting my daughter," Ilara said, her gaze unwavering. "It was teaching her to accept injustice. My father taught me that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. He stood up to a corrupt foreman at his factory and lost his job, but he never lost his peace. I can't live in fear anymore. Thorn isn't just stealing money, he's destroying good people." She handed him a small notebook, its pages filled with meticulous records of dates, amounts, and overheard conversations. It was a chronicle of her courage, built day by day in the shadow of fear. "This is remarkable," he said, humbled. "He's already suspicious," she admitted. "He questioned me about you today. We need to get you out of there." "No," she said firmly. "If I quit, he'll know I talked. You need someone on the inside." Her courage was a revelation. He, with all his power and wealth, had been blind. She, with everything to lose, was willing to fight. "Tomorrow morning," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, 6 a.m. Thorn is receiving a special delivery at the loading dock. No security cameras. If you could be there, I'll be there, Julian said without hesitation. But you have to promise me, if you feel threatened in any way, you get out. You call me and I will make sure you and Mia are protected. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. You barely know me. I know your character, he replied honestly. And that's more than I can say for most people I've known for years. For the first time, the wall between them seemed to dissolve. Thank you, she whispered. I haven't had anyone offer to protect me in a very long time. As they walked back toward the fountain, he found himself wanting to know more, not about the conspiracy, but about her. He learned about Mia, her dreams of being a paleontologist, and Ilara's own deferred dream of finishing her business degree. After this is over, Julian said, the word surprising even himself, I want to offer you a position in management. The company needs your integrity, your vision. She stared at him, shocked. Based on one conversation, based on your character, he reiterated, we'll support your education, full tuition. The hope that dawned in her eyes was almost heartbreaking. Are you serious? Completely, he confirmed. But first we take down Thorn. As she turned to leave, he called out, "Ilara, it's Julian." She smiled, a real radiant smile that transformed her face. In that moment, despite the fear and the exhaustion, he saw the light in her. "Good night, Julian." As he watched her disappear into the Chicago night, Julian felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. This was no longer just about business. It was about justice and about the remarkable woman who had reignited his own forgotten principles. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. Marcus Thorne was about to learn what happened when you poked a sleeping lion. The pre-dawn fog was thick as Julian watched the loading dock from his parked SUV. A text from Ilara buzzed, "Thorne just arrived. White van pulling up. Stay hidden." He watched Thorne and two other men unload unmarked boxes from the van. It looked less like a food delivery and more like a contraband exchange. He documented it all with his camera's telephoto lens, his heart pounding. The men exchanged envelopes. This was bigger than embezzlement. This was organized crime. His phone rang. It was Ilara, her voice a frantic whisper. "Did you see it? It's not just theft, Julian. It's a distribution point for stolen goods, electronics, jewelry. He's using the broken freezer to store it." There was a pause. "There's something else. Something I was too scared to tell you." They met at the Lincoln Park Zoo, a neutral open space. As they walked, the full, horrifying truth came out. Thorne hadn't just threatened her, he'd been sexually harassing her for months. He'd offered her a promotion in exchange for keeping him happy, and when she refused, he'd cut her hours. Last week, he'd shown her photos, surveillance photos of Mia at her school, at the park. He had been stalking them. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Julian asked, his voice tight with fury. "With what?" she countered. "A note under my door, his word against mine. He's friends with half the cops in the district." She had decided to trust Julian, she explained, after researching him. She'd found articles not just about his business success, but about his character, how he'd refused to lay off staff during the 2008 crisis, and a heart-wrenching story about how he'd created college funds for the children of a waitress who had been killed by an ex-boyfriend. "That's not something a heartless businessman does," she said softly. "That's something a good man does." The revelation struck him. She had taken a calculated risk based not on his wealth but on her assessment of his soul. In that moment, the professional distance between them evaporated, replaced by a raw, undeniable connection. He confessed his own loneliness, his failed engagement to a woman who saw him as an accessory, not a partner. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he admitted, the words hanging in the cool morning air. "About your courage." "And I've been thinking about you," she whispered back. "The man who listened without judgment, the man who treats a tired waitress with respect." The attraction was a palpable current between them. It was complicated, messy, and dangerous, but it was real. Their conversation was cut short by a call from Thorne himself. He was suspicious. He knew Julian had visited the diner. The walls were closing in. "Tonight," Ilara said, her voice firm, "there's a bigger delivery scheduled, 11 p.m. We have to move now. It's too dangerous for you to be there." "I have to be," she insisted. "The only way out is through." That evening, as Julian sat on surveillance, a text from Ilara sent a chill down his spine. "He's taking me to the storage area to help with inventory. This is it." Then silence. 15 agonizing minutes passed. Suddenly, his phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Croft, this is Marcus Thorne. I believe you've been looking for me." A cascade of messages followed, a cruel, psychological assault. Thorne knew everything, the surveillance, the recording device Julian was wearing, the entire plan, and then the knockout blow. "Your precious Ilara has been working with me from the beginning." Julian's world tilted. It wasn't possible. Thorne sent photos, Julian entering Ilara's building, playing with Mia, and the most damning image of all, Ilara shaking hands with Thorne in the diner's parking lot, smiling. Did you really think a woman like that could fall for a man like you so quickly? Thorne's texts were poison. He claimed Ilara was a professional con artist who targeted wealthy, lonely men. He revealed that federal investigators, tipped off by evidence Ilara had provided, would be arresting Julian for embezzlement in the morning. Julian's heart fractured. The connection, the love he'd started to feel, was it all a lie? He raced to Ilara's apartment. The door was unlocked. He stepped inside, and his world collapsed. The apartment was empty, stripped bare. No furniture, no artwork, no sign that Ilara and Mia had ever existed. On the floor lay a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was Ilara's. The woman you thought you were falling in love with never existed. Z. A final text from Thorne sealed his fate. Now you understand. Sign the papers, disappear, and this nightmare ends. Refuse, and I'll destroy what's left of your life. He was broken, betrayed, a fugitive facing ruin, but as he sat in his car, a tiny, defiant question echoed in the wreckage of his mind. If it was all a con, why had her fear felt so real? Why had her love for Mia shone so brightly? Driven by a sliver of hope, he re-examined the photo of Ilara and Thorne. He zoomed in. Her smile was forced, her posture tense. And was that a bruise on her temple, hidden by her hair? It wasn't a handshake, it was a threat. He raced back to the diner. The loading dock door was ajar. He crept inside and heard voices, Thorne and his men. And then he saw her, tied to a chair, her face bruised and swollen, but her eyes blazing with defiance. Thorne was trying to force her to make one last phone call, to break Julian's heart completely, to tell him it had all been a lie. "I won't do it," Ilara said, her voice shaking but firm. "I won't destroy him for you." In that moment, Julian knew. He stepped out from behind the supply rack, his phone held high, recording. "I wouldn't make that call if I were you." In the chaos that followed, fueled by a bluff about the FBI and a surge of pure adrenaline, Julian managed to free Ilara. They escaped into the night, leaving Thorne and his crumbling empire behind. As they sped away, Theodore made the real call to 911. "I thought you believed him," she whispered, her head on his shoulder. "Never," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "My heart knew the truth. What we have is real." 6 months later, the diner, now renamed Eleanor's, buzzed with the warm chatter of a wedding reception. Julian and Ilara had exchanged vows that morning at the zoo, where they had forged their bond. The diner, once a symbol of decay, was now a beacon of ethical business, a testament to their shared vision. Ilara, radiant in a white dress, moved through the crowd. She was no longer just a waitress. She was the director of employee relations for Blackwood Hospitality Group and a student at Northwestern, her deferred dream finally within reach. Mia, in a pink flower girl dress and purple sneakers, darted through the tables, an honorary member of the staff. "How does it feel, Mrs. Croft?" Julian asked, pulling her into his arms. "Like I'm living in someone else's fairy tale," she whispered. They stood together to address their guests, a circle of loving faces. "My wife taught me that the most important ingredient in any recipe is love," Julian said, his eyes locked on hers. "And speaking up," Ilara added, her voice strong, "led me to a future I never dared to dream about." They announced their final transformative plan, stock options for every employee in the company. The applause was thunderous. Later, as the guests departed, they swayed together in the center of the quiet restaurant, a slow dance in the place where their adventure began. Mia slept soundly in a corner booth. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't recognized me that day?" Julian asked. "I think we would have found each other eventually," Ilara replied, her head resting on his chest. "The universe has a way of bringing together people who are meant to be." Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered with infinite possibility, a city of second chances where a simple note slipped under a coffee cup had rewritten not just a business, but two souls. We hope you were captivated by Julian and Ilara's incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, show your support by hitting that like button right now. And to make sure you never miss our next adventure, click subscribe and become part of the Stories for You family. We can't wait to share our next tale with you.